Great to see you all here. We have a bit of a smaller group because Java is a bit more niche than some of the other webinars we do. But excited to show you some new things we've been working on. So basically for today, what we'll do is, well, we'll start with some introductions. I'll quickly go over some of the features we've recently shipped in the past month or so. Then I'll quickly show you the new Java blocks that are part of that recently shipped. And then we'll basically go through two different examples of how to implement Java assignments. So one example will be a coding quiz with like some multiple choice questions and sort of smaller Java questions. And then we'll go over an advanced assignment using JUnit and some other things. And finally, we'll end up with some upcoming features we're working on. And also we'll have plenty of time for sort of Q&A and all those things. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to just put it in the chat. And we'll talk about it and we'll answer all of those questions. To sort of quickly introduce everyone here. So my name is Yuri. I'm co-founder and CEO at CodeGrade. Within this group, we also have a lot of my teammates here, including our CTO Thomas, and a bunch of other people and developers and everything. So even if you have very difficult questions, we should have all the people necessary to answer any of those. So let's start with some features we've recently shipped in the past month. Our development team has been very busy. And these are all of the sort of features we've implemented since the past webinar. Of course, those first two specifically relating to Java, which we'll go into in a lot of detail throughout this webinar. But I do want to highlight a couple of other like important features we've recently released. And I'll quickly show some of these. Sort of the first very exciting feature we've shipped recently is copy pasting auto test blocks. So this is especially useful for sort of more advanced users. So I'll quickly show it and we'll go into this specific assignment here. But basically, if you press the three dots here, you will see a new copy button. And then if you go into any other assignment anywhere, you can just Control-V this or use the paste button here and it will paste everything. This works across assignments, so this is especially useful if you're sort of doing the same kind of things over and over in assignments. So this is a super useful feature. Especially one workflow that I have currently is like I've just one assignment with like a ton of like sort of a sandbox assignment with a ton of different things I often do. And I just copy paste from there into the assignments I'm creating. So you can sort of do templates and stuff with this feature. One quick workaround I also want to show you here is that, so again, if you sort of have a block here, let's say a PyTest block, a Python block, and then another block, and you want to copy both of those, you can just wrap them inside, for instance, this run only in block, and just put it like this and then copy this one. And then it will copy everything inside it. And especially this run only in block, if it's on this setting, it doesn't do anything. So this is an easy way to just copy paste multiple blocks at once as well. So this is a really cool, useful feature. Another really big feature that we've been working on and that I'm very excited about is the ability to sort of run individual questions in quizzes. And we'll see this in a second. But basically, if you use the coding quizzes feature before, if the students would press the run button in the editor, it would run all of the questions within the quiz, which especially if let's say you have a quiz with 10 questions and you have to run question 10, it first has to run question 1 through 9, and it's a bit slow. We fixed that. So if I go into this example here of a quiz, you can now see that there's a new button here, check your answer, that will just run an individual question. So I can go to this one, I can check your answer, and it will just run this question. If you do want to only give students the ability to run all questions, this is configurable on the quiz, and we'll see that once we go through this example in a second. But this makes the quizzes a lot more powerful, I think, and a lot more useful for a lot of people. Another feature related to quizzes is that if you provide inline feedback to quizzes, which is now possible, it will also show in the feedback overview. So the feedback overview is this tab here for students. And you can see I provided some feedback here, and it's now available here as well. Before that was not supported yet, and you would get a message that's not supported. Now it is supported, and you will be able to see that. So that's nice, and that sort of makes quizzes a lot more mature feature nowadays. We've also improved some IO test permissions. I won't go into too much detail here, but it just makes it easier to use the hype block now with IO tests and match steps. Some other feature in Autotest that's useful, I think, is the ability to create empty files. So if I go into this assignment again, into the Autotest, and then I use an upload files block. And again, you can use this upload files block to upload any file you might need in the test. But sometimes you just want to create like everything from within Autotest without having to create something manually on your own computer. So you can just press add empty file. You can give it a name, maybe test.java. And then you can just write all your code in here. You can save it. And this will just add this as an empty file. And you can click on it and edit it, and you can edit file names now as well. So that's also a useful feature if you quickly want to create some files that are available within Autotest. And then finally, the one I want to quickly show you is the ability to give points in a manual continuous rubric. So if you're not familiar within CodeGrade, I'll go into this assignment. Within a rubric, you have two types. You have a discrete type where sort of things are, for instance, needs revision and correct. Or you have this continuous type where you can get anywhere from 0 to n points. A lot of people use this continuous one to automatically grade code, but some people do want to use this to manually do things and sort of manually assign a grade on part of the rubric. If you go into the code here for submission now, you go to the manual rubric, you can now decide whether you want to fill in a percentage like 50, or you want to fill in points like 5. So this just makes it a lot easier, and it will sort of remember what your setting is. And then you can give all students either points or percentages, and that should make your workflow a bit easier as well. Besides that, we've also did some small improvements, including like accessibility fixes, which we do sort of all the time to sort of continue increasing the accessibility of our platform, but also just making small improvements. So without further ado, let's talk about Java now. And you saw it a little bit already. We have added 2 new Java blocks, and this sort of completes most of our like Java testing stuff within Autotest. The first one is a Java compile block where you can just easily give like a file or a pattern to compile code. And the second one is a JUnit 5 block where you can just add your code within Autotest itself, and then that will basically run the tests. But we'll go into a lot of detail today on that. So let's get started with sort of using these blocks. That's the wrong slide. Let's get started. So basically, we'll start out with a Java quiz. So again, those coding quizzes, I'll quickly go into an example of it here. What this allows you to do is combine sort of multiple choice questions and smaller coding questions here. So you can see an example of that right here, where first we get a multiple choice question and we can sort of fill this in. And then if I press check your answer, we will see that this is incorrect, and I get a hint, and then I can fix it, check my answer, and hopefully now it's correct. And now it's correct. And then the next one is we get sort of a coding question where we maybe practice with this specific concept. In this case, we just write a simple program that takes 2 integers as input and prints the sum. And we can just code it right here, and then we can check answer, which will run the tests that are assigned to this. In this case, it will compile and then and do an output check. And then finally, we can hand this in. So these are really useful for 2 types of assignments. One is sort of formative things where you really want students to practice with simple concepts. And another might be if you want to do like more summative testing in one assignment with multiple questions, this can be useful. So let's take a look at how we might set something up like this. So I'm going to create a new quiz here. And again, depending on how CodeGrade is integrated, you might do this through your LMS. But basically, when I set up a quiz, what I want to do, first of all, is make sure that students can only submit through the editor. Because in the editor, they basically get that UI where they can see the multiple choice questions, they can see the coding questions, and they can fill this in. So I really want to make sure that I'm just using the editor. And I don't have to set any template or something. CodeGrade will do that automatically for us. Once I've done that, again, I can play around with all these different settings and everything will sort of work, like the schedule and whether the grades are published and all those things. But I can basically go straight away into the automatic test for this, and I can select Audit Test V2 and I can create one. And again, if you're not familiar with CodeGrade, once you create this automatic test interface, you will see there's basically two different phases. We have the setup phase where any installation of things happen. So this is, for instance, where you will choose your Java version, and you might install extra packages and things here. And you will see here that there's an install Java block for us, and I can select, for instance, Java 21 here. And this will basically run once, and then we'll create an image of this configuration. And then as soon as students press that check your answer button, or they press the run button, or they hand in, it will run the test that we'll define here in this test phase from the state after this setup script. So now that we've done that, we can actually create our test, because now we know Java is installed and we can sort of create tests. For a quiz block, for a quiz, if you scroll all the way down to the sort of blue blocks here, you can see all of the blocks related to quizzes. And then I can select coding quiz. A quick question: the setup, is it for all students? And test, is that for every individual student? Yeah, that's sort of what it is. So the setup will just run once for all students. So the student code won't be available here yet. This is just for installing stuff. And then every time students hand something in or they press the run button, it will run this whole test step, sort of from top to bottom. So let's drag in a quiz. And a quiz will basically tell CodeGrade this will be a quiz. And within this quiz, I can wrap questions. So the first thing I can see here is that I can set a name for my quiz. Let's just call it quiz. That seems fine. And then here you see that new option that we just added, whether you want students to be able to run single questions. If you can enable this or disable this, and by default it's enabled, which I think is a good idea. So we'll just keep it on enabled. Then I can add in different types of questions. So we have 3 of these, either multiple choice, select all that apply, and a coding question. So first, let's just drag in a multiple choice question. And let's do paste this in. So what's the correct way to declare a variable in Java? And we'll call this question 1. And then I can add in different answers. And you can see that all of these answers, they support Markdown. So if I do it like this, then it will become like a little Java code block with this answer in it. And then I can add a new answer below, and I can add one more. Another one. And then another one. And then finally, I can configure which one is the correct answer. And I can also decide how I want answers to be ordered. So either the same as you configured it or randomly for each student. So let's do randomly. And then finally, what we can also do is configure the hint for each answer. So we can do something like this when it's correct. And we can, for instance, do this when it's incorrect, and you can do these for all of these, and they turn like, you can see the color changes whenever you've configured a hint. So you know you've configured that, and you can sort of do that for all your questions. One thing we haven't done yet now is we've added a question into my quiz, but it's actually not graded yet. So all the grading within Autotest, within CodeGrade, happens through rubrics. So if you don't connect tests to a rubric, then the test won't be graded, which is great if you want to do like certain tests that are sort of ungraded, formative, or you just want to do like setup things. So you want to drag and drop in like a script block and sort of change some things, do some stuff. You don't want that to be graded. You just do it like that and nothing happens. If we do want to make sure that this question is graded, which we probably want because it's a question, we can drag and drop in a connect rubric block. And then we can move this multiple choice question inside this connect rubric. And then we can create from here a new category for this rubric. So I don't have to go in for the rubric. You can go into here and sort of create a new rubric, but you can also do this from within Autotest. So I can add a new rubric for question 1, and we'll say 0 point for needs revision, and then 1 point for correct. Submit. And now basically if students have it incorrect, they get 0 points. If they have it correct, they get 1 point. Then now we've done basically a multiple choice question. The next thing is we can add a coding question. So again, what I will actually do first now is add in a rubric, create a new category, question 2, and we'll do needs revision correct. And then what we will do is we'll scroll all the way to the bottom, and now we drag and drop in a coding question. And this coding question is a little bit different than the multiple choice question. Again, we still have the same sort of question statement here, which we can fill in. But you can also see that you have to sort of set the student file name. And this is not really for like students to know about. This doesn't really matter to them. But as you can see, you can now drag things inside this coding question. Basically, everything you drag inside here will have this file available with the student answer. So I can now, once I'm ready for that, I can drag and drop in tests, and I can run those tests on this specific file. So in this case, we'll call this sum calculator.java, and then any test I drag and drop inside here will have this file available, and I can run tests on this. Let's also give this a name, question 2. And then finally, what I can do is I can provide a starter template to the students, which in the case of Java, we might want to do because we have to make sure that they use like the correct class name, and maybe we want to make sure there's a main function. So I can just create like a quick starter template, and then the students will start with this already preloaded in the quiz question. And now once I've done that, basically what I can do is within this block, now sum calculator.java is available, and now I can create tests in here. So I go to these sort of orangey blocks, and those are all of my Java blocks. So now I can drag and drop in a Java compile. And by the way, if you drag and drop wrong and you sort of don't want to mess around with the dragging and dropping, I usually use this button, and you can just move stuff around, and it's really easy. And now we can create a test, and we can call this compile, and we can make sure to run sum calculator.java. You see it's already preloaded with like sort of a glob already, and there's this environment variable available, $student, which is basically points to the student directory, and this sum calculator.java is the file that is available because it matches this. So this will compile this file, and if there are any errors, it will actually give feedback inside the code itself, which we can see in a second. But this is all I need to do. I don't have to run any custom commands anymore. Just use Java compile, and everything will work. And then next, I can add some tests to this. So for instance, in this case, we can add in an input-output test, which we'll call output test. And then here we can run a command. So in this case, just Java sum calculator, because that's the compiled file we've created. And then finally, we can add in a match to this. For instance, case 1, and we'll give 4 and 5 as the input, which is sort of the example we give here. And then we expect the output to be this, and we can ignore white spaces and match case insensitively and all those things. And now we basically have a basic input-output test. We're going to go one step further in this, because basically if the compile fails, this IO test will always fail because there's no compiled file, and the students might get like a weird error message with the IO test that we don't want them to see. So we have another block available here called the run if, and I can drag and drop that in, and then I'll move the IO test into there. And then basically if question 2, if the tests above here haven't passed, then the test inside here won't run. So this makes it a bit nicer to basically only run this if the compiling goes right. Now we've sort of have a basic setup. What we can do now is we can build this and we can publish this to the students. So I can press build snapshot, and basically it will prompt me now to upload a test submission. Of course, because we have these quizzes, we can't really upload a test submission here. So for now, you can just sort of upload any kind of file. So I will just upload like a random Java file, and then everything will fail, but we'll fix that in a second. And you will see that it will run the setup once, and now this will all fail. But I can actually open the submission here. I can just press edit, and then I have to publish it actually. Sorry about that. So I can build it, I can publish it, and now if I open up this submission and edit it, you will see actually that the quiz appears, so I can delete this file. This is sort of a bit of a workaround, but I can delete this file, then I can quickly put in the correct solution, which is the solution, and then hand it in. And now we can check if it all works correctly. It should. And you can see if I hand in, then it will run all tests. But as you can see in the editing environment, you had these questions available here with the check your answer button. So I can add more tests to this and all those things. So this is sort of a quick example on how to use these quizzes. Of course, because these are very simple assignments, we don't have to do much complicated testing. We can just use sort of these IO tests to do it. But let's take a look at a more advanced example now. And that's this one. So let's quickly go into the student here. And basically for this specific assignment, students have to create sort of a library management system with like a bunch of different classes that you can see here. And we have to test this in some way, and we want to make sure that we can test the object-oriented structure and all of those things. So if I go into the settings here, and I'll quickly look at the description, you can see what kind of assignment this is. So in this case, they have to create 4 different sort of classes, and then one sort of main program class that provides like a menu-driven interface to interact with the system. Here again, because this is not a quiz, I use this assignment description here. Of course, if you use a learning management system, you can probably put that in there as well. And then under the general settings, I've actually allowed file uploading and the editor in this case. So students can also just work in the VS Code, for instance, and then upload an archive or the individual files to CodeGrade, and then run the test that way. So that's another easy way of doing it. If I look at the rubric here, again, it's not a rubric category per question because we want to go into a bit more detail. So we have a rubric for the functionality of it, and then also a rubric for the code quality, running like a linter in this case. And then if we go to the other tests and to the setup, again, we just installed Java. We don't have to do any custom things right here. And then if we go to the tests, we actually use a lot of JUnit testing because that's sort of a really easy way or at least the best way of sort of testing testing like classes and all of those things. But we still have sort of this compile check in here, so we do make sure that all of the files that the students hand in compile. And if they do, then we run JUnit 5. So again, under the sort of orange blocks, you can see there's a JUnit 5 block, and you can just either copy paste or write your tests in here. So you can see that here, I've given it a name. And then also I have to set the name of my test file. So this is an important thing. If you're used to maybe Python and all of those things, you don't have to do that. But here, you basically have to match what your class name is. So in this case, my class is named booktest.java, booktest, so my file needs to be booktest.java. If you already have files on your like on your computer that you've written, you can just copy paste it in here, set the file name here, and then you're all done. And then in here, I can just create all of my tests. So for instance, testing if the initialization work, I initialize a book, and then I just do some search statements on whether this works or not. And then a feature we use in CodeGrade, you can use this @display name here to give it sort of a custom name. So if you don't do this, in the test output, what the student will see is just the name of the test. If you do this, then it will show this sort of customized name, which is a bit nicer to the student. So actually, if I press this build button, we can sort of see what the feedback might look like. So you can see it compiles first, which works, and then it runs some tests for the book class. And then you can see for every test, it basically shows that display name, and then whether that passes or fails. And then I can do maybe an assert true, false to show what it looks like if it fails. And well, and now we should see a test fail. And then you basically get the stack trace from JUnit here. So that's basically an easy way of doing that. And you can create all of these tests. Of course, things like ChatGPT are really helpful for helping you sort of generate a lot of these or sort of help you write all of this. So definitely recommend using that. And again, we use these run if blocks to just create more different kinds of tests. And it's pretty easy to sort of create comprehensive tests for this specific class. And you can see that here. In this case, for every class, we sort of do a different test file. You could, of course, do everything sort of in one big test. But what in this case we want to do, what we've chosen to do, is that we only want to run user tests here if the book tests pass, just to give a bit more granularity to the students and make sure that if they already struggle with the book test, they focus on fixing that first before going to the next part of the assignment. So that's why we've decided to sort of split them up into multiple tests. You can sort of do that in as many blocks as you want or in as little blocks as you want. That's sort of up to you. So great question here in the chat. First of all, I'll quickly answer Heather's question. Are tests equally weighted when assigning points? So by default, yes. So all of these tests have a default weight of 1, basically. I can either give my whole JUnit test block a weight with like this weight block, and making that like, not minus, like 5. And now, again, all the tests within this JUnit block are still equally weighted, but this whole test has now a weight of 5. I can also work with the display name. I think I'm just checking that with one of the developers, if that works still. If anyone is listening.
Oh, yes, that should still work with the display name as well, but there's also a special attribute for it. Let me just quickly look up what that is.
That's even better. So this, I think, works as well. Yeah, so this works for sure. So within the display name, we have sort of this workaround here where you can just like put the weight between like these brackets. So that's an easy way of doing it. So now you can see that within my test here, this one has a weight of 2 automatically, and the ones have a weight of 1. And then this has 4 points now, but that's then scaled to 5. So you can make things very complicated through this, but you can definitely do different weights. I'll quickly answer some earlier questions as well. One about the file upload block. So the file upload block is not for students to upload a file. This is just for you to make any files available. So let's say you're teaching like a data science course and you need to have some data available. You can just like upload your CSV file in here, for instance, and it will just be available in the testing environment. So the students' code can run that, use that file to run certain things, or in your test, you can use that. Question for Anders, can it manage packages? So that's a great question on package management in Java, which is always a complicated thing. So for that, how to work with packages and this, Thomas.
Yeah. So to give a little bit of on background on this, so like this is a level of support that we internally call gold support, which basically means we've created UI elements to do this. The internal support of like how we are actually managing JUnit and how we're actually doing the compile was already available. And some of you, I think, were already using that as well with the CG command. So that also answers the other question I just see pop up in the chat. Can you do this outside of, like, without using the UI? Yes, you just use the commands then. So for the managing of packages, yes and no. So we have explicitly chosen not to create any kind of compiling support for managing packages. Mostly because if you're going to do stuff with packages, I expect that you have something like Maven or Gradle set up. And as every setup for that is quite custom, we think it's best to just support that with our support team instead of having like a global support for everyone. Can you use packages in this, like in these tests? Yes, that is possible by basically just compiling your package first to a jar or whatever, and adding that to the class path variable.
Yeah, so what I'm quickly showing here as well, thank you, Thomas, is basically this JUnit 5 block is using this CG command under the hood, basically, and you have this CG JUnit 5, and you can basically run, install, and do all of those things as well using this command. And what's really helpful is you can just, if you type CG in the script block and then -- help, you will see all of the commands available. And then you can go into a command and then -- help, and you can sort of see more information about that and sort of figure out exactly how it works through the help interface, which makes this really easy. Again, final thing. So that sort of wraps up the JUnit 5 block. Another block that was already available is the Checkstyle. So that's sort of, if you look at all of the orange blocks, that's the final Java block we have available, which basically allows you to run Checkstyle on here. You can start from a template if you want, so either Sun, Google, sort of our default. And then the configuration is below here. And you can sort of configure Checkstyle quite easily through this. And then when we go in here, you will see that any errors will show up here. And then if I quickly publish this to the students, you will also see that, let's see, where is this? Book.java. This line will become red. So that's also a nice thing. And while I'm here, I'll also quickly show you sort of what the compiler does and what kind of errors it gives. So if I make a error right here, then you will see that the Java compiler will give an error right here, but it will also make the code, the line red, and students will be able to see it right here, either in the editor or in the submission page. And I can just add the semicolon, then run again, and then it will work. All right. That sort of wraps up our Java blocks. And basically are sort of what we call the gold Java support internally. So that again is the compile block, the JUnit 5 block, the Checkstyle, and of course all other blocks work as well for Java, like the IO test, the code structure test, and all of those things. What we will also do is we'll upload these 2 different assignments to the community library, so you can just import them. We'll do that after this this call is over. And then just from the general tab here, you can scroll down to community library and then select Java. And then both the advanced assignment and this quiz example will be available from the top, in the top of that list. So you can sort of start with just importing this and sort of modifying this. And again, you can use this new sort of copy feature to easily copy these over to different assignments as well. Let me quickly share my different screen. Oh, it was actually in this tab. Quickly, some upcoming features. One nice to have feature that we're launching soon is, for instance, you may have seen this if you use like the code structure block, for instance. In the test, you will get a message that it sort of, or it takes a couple seconds to install semgrep, which is we use underlying for the code structure block, and it's basically installing that in the test phase for every student, and that's a bit annoying. So we're coming soon with a feature where we are automatically pre-installing software in Autotest without you having to do anything. So that will definitely help with the quality of life for your students and you. And we have a bunch of other sort of smaller features coming as well that we'll talk more about soon, and you'll find in our newsletter. And also in the summer, we will launch Jupyter Notebook support in the CodeGrade. That's of course not necessarily related to Java, but if you do teach with Jupyter Notebooks, that's nice to have.